So here we are. I called this 12 amazing facts, but in reality, it will be something like 12 plus. And knowing the abundance of information, how fast the field is developing, it's really like an ocean where you can drown. So if you really like this format, we could always continue because it sounds like never-ending topic with more and more research. And I don't know how many articles show up each day, you know, with more research data on the brain, on what neurofeedback can do, or how you can analyze the brain, or how what we see with the EEG, how the brain waves can help us identify the problems, underlying problems, and how even, for example, they are linked with our genetics, right, and manifest as certain disorders. So I found it extremely fascinating that actually brain waves will be kind of in the middle, so they'll bound it all. It's not just the, you know, genes how it long used to be in our materialistic world. Everybody blamed the genes, but then in reality, I think it's of course genes, predisposition, plus how it turned out in your life, your personal life story, right? How it expressed with the environment and conditions that you encountered. My name is Oxana Bondarchuk, and those who don't know me, once again, you may hear my Russian accent, it's still there, though I've been in Australia for over 10 years by now. And I did a training with Judith, so I'm certified Awakened Mind practitioner and trainer. And since I think 2016, we've been doing these nice webinars online to help everybody who is interested in the mind mirror, who is working with the mind mirror, to get together and share our experiences. So I am online events moderator. And my background comes from economics first, working in corporate marketing and finance. And then I switched to psychology and did a degree in psychology as well, both in kind of, if you can call it classical academic psychology, and transpersonal psychology, which I often call spiritual psychology, because it goes beyond behavior and stimuli reaction. So it embraces the realms of all these esoteric realms or shamanic realms, the teachings of Eastern traditions, religions, and philosophies. So it kind of embraces it all. And the recent thing that inspired me to do this whole program was a grant that I received from New South Wales government. And I've been thinking, okay, how can I spend it? And I thought, I would like to learn more about the science behind what we are doing with the mind mirror. So that was a great chance to dig in. And I thought the good point to start should be probably the very basic, they call it didactic course in clinical neurofeedback. So which would help me to understand more of, you know, what we do, where it comes from, how it can be applied. Since I'm coming from the field of psychology, of course, it's kind of predictable interest to dig a bit more in that direction. While exploring and studying, I found lots of things I kind of maybe disregarded, didn't pay enough attention to. And honestly, just simply because this field is developing so fast, and I graduated the psychology in 2005, so the last 15 years, there have been so much done, and it's so fast paced, so there is always a lot to catch up and to learn. I first of all would like to say thank you to all the people who inspired, and that's why I ended up doing this course that I was doing. This was one of the recent programs with Paula, who shared her experiences with clinical neurofeedback. So I'll just quickly flip through, and I'll leave you with the presentation after, so you could go back and check these webinars, maybe in our video gallery if you are interested to learn more, because all of them are amazing and interesting, and not only the knowledge and experience about what, you know, clinical practitioners do, but just the people themselves, you know, they're amazing. You have to be quite intelligent, you have to have great brain capacity, I should say, to dig deep in clinical neurofeedback. It has a lot to do with medical field, so I guess it's easier for the doctors, and it will be much harder for all others who are not coming from that field. Anyway, thanks to Paula and Leonardo Mascara, of course, because he did another great program on networks and meditation. So highly recommend you to watch that. So he started with the Mind Mirror with Anna and then moved on with clinical, and he does lots of research right now in Brazil, right? That's where he is from. And then Robin Bernhard, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, so my apologies. She works with trauma and she is trained Mind Mirror practitioner as well. So she shared her experience of how she integrated the meditations and the Mind Mirror into her clinical work. That was very interesting. And then one of the very first programs we did on neurofeedback was with Cindy Margaret's, which basically, from what I learned, embraces and tried and learned all types of possible schools and directions of neurofeedback that exist these days. Plus, we shared a lot of other interesting things during that early days program. So it was done, I think, quite a while ago, maybe in 2016 or 17, but it's a great one too. So before we start, just a few words that I want to point out, because if you come, like I assume, if we come from the level of 0, absolute beginner, that's always a good place to start. So for those who know it all, to whom it's absolutely obvious, that's great. Let's just repeat it. But I want to make sure, if I showed up at this program with basically 0 basic knowledge, I would like to know these things, because they will help me to avoid mistakes and misunderstandings, right? So that's the classical picture of how Mind Mirror maps the consciousness, right? So you can clearly recognize the bands, the beta bands, which, you know, they signify the frequencies, right? So, and we mark them or display them as bands in different colors, where the frequency goes vertically and the amplitude or the volume, how loud these brain waves are, how strong, powerful they are, go horizontally. So beta stands for conscious mind, as we know. When you're alert, awake, and you're talking, I'm probably running lots of beta right now. If you have too much beta, it means you're very anxious. Alpha is in green. We call it alpha bridge. It's like a water line between our conscious mind, subconscious mind, and it needs to be open if we want to connect with deeper parts of ourselves, with subconscious mind, which is represented by theta. These are these blue bands here, and which contains all our programs, suppressed stuff, good stuff, all our wisdom. And then the slowest delta brain waves we identify as unconscious mind, or the doors to universal consciousness, because we often see these doors being open when healers and mediums and psychics do their work to connect. And I call it Google, the cosmic internet. They go beyond themselves, beyond the individual computers, brain computers, to find the information that lies beyond, somewhere in the universal field, the information or energy. Okay, so that's very well-known picture of what we see with the Mind Mirror. So you can find all these descriptions. There was a separate program, so I assume that you know all of this, so we can continue. So more common, if you go in clinical field, that we'll be looking at the waves, right? Not at the bands, nicely structured and easily to read, easily interpreted, but there will be lots of waves that are analyzed in their own way as well. So the dynamics, again, it's easy to follow, to read, to interpret with the mind mirror. I showed this slide many times. So we all look at patterns, right? So we see how these different bands, these different frequencies marked in different colors relate to each other, right? What's the proportion, right? And we always want to see, we don't want to see bottlenecks. We always want to see alpha bridge being open, these green bands in the middle. And as we progress with the training, we want it to go more into a circle, which would be more advanced, so less bottlenecks, more advanced, more optimal is our brain function. So it means we awaken, we evolve. As we open alpha, we awaken, we go into more like a flow mode, open flow mode. And then when we go and expand further, we go into oneness, into unity consciousness, and we call it evolved mind pattern, the circular one. And then, of course, there I marked a few other patterns that you may also see on the way, like when you open more theta than alpha and more delta than theta, it looks like a skirt, and we call it channeling pattern or trance pattern. So it's the pattern of sleep for those who are non-meditators, and it's the pattern of us going deeper before. Very often it happens before we go into evolved mind, so it's kind of intermediate in between 1 and 3. So I put numbers here because it happens differently. The dynamics is different, but the logic is less bottlenecks, more circular, the better. That's the oneness. That's all we want. Go beyond our limited conscious mind, awaken to deeper levels of ourselves, awaken to bigger wisdom of the universe, and embrace it all, because that's a very healthy state to be. I won't go further on that. There are other programs where you can explore that. And then one more reminder that with the mind mirror, we use pretty fixed spots to allocate our electrodes, where we stick our electrodes. So roughly when we discuss it with Judith, so clearly we put the back ones in locations that are called O1 and O2. So these are 2 spots on the occipital lobe. So as you can see, it kind of, they both sit right if you cross the head, like across the eyes, through the head. And then the side electrodes, they go on temporal lobe, just kind of at the above the corners of your ears, so to say. So this will be somewhere between T3, T5, or T4, T6. If we relate to how these locations are called in, again, clinical field. So you might have seen or come across that, of course, there can be many more locations to be used, and they have their international system, 10-20 system, or 19. There can be even more than 19 electrodes as well, up to 62, I think. Haven't heard of more than that. But yeah, so to say, we use 5 electrodes. It's dual channel device, and we measure both left and right hemisphere. So with the mind mirror, the best we can see is how I think Max Kate put it, how we see the world, because the occipital lobe will mainly reflect the projections or our sensory perception, right? How we see it. And then the sides, they'll be all about space, time, memory, and audio processing as well, and interpretation of the stimuli. So it's kind of how we see, how we hear, how we maybe code and orientate ourselves, code into memories and orientate ourselves in this world. So the locations are important, and they we have to keep in mind, if we talk about alpha or beta, it's always good, or any other frequency, it's always good to keep in mind what the locations are, because it's okay to have alpha, lots of alpha in the back, and it's normal, but it might indicate disorder if you see lots of alpha in the front of the brain, right, in this frontal parts. And of course, T and all these abbreviations just may be handy for you to know if you don't know it. O stands for occipital, T stands for temporal, and C stands for central, and P for parietal, and F for frontal. So it's kind of very easy. It's just abbreviation of different lobes and parts of the brain. Again, this is just to remind you that the origin of the frequencies that we see is not that linear and straightforward. There are quite a few sources of generators of beta, of alpha, of theta. So here they are summarized. I wouldn't go far into details because we'll drown in the technical details, and that's not the purpose. It's just to give you one more idea, for example, where they might be coming from. So you can see alpha rhythm, for example, will be coming from kind of these areas of the brain. And theta, they put more like centrally. It's more like central is, yeah, it is centrally. And temporally, and then beta, it's more to the front. So again, location is important. And then how we do training itself, I think it's worth noting once again that we train preset patterns. We either do it with Anna-Weiss's protocol, so we use meditations to train the brain, to optimize the brain function, because it's a logical progression of meditations that and exercises that helps you to get where probably any other neurofeedback training is trying to get you to more optimal brain function, to harmonize, to balance your brain. And we easily can read and interpret these patterns from the way the mind mirror presents it, right? Through the bends. So much easier than looking at the wriggly waves. And then we also have what we call self-training program, or automatic mode, I should call it, where we also have presets that you can train, like beta reduction, awakened mind, alpha synchrony, alpha theta. So not just the patterns, but a few other things. And how do we get feedback with the mind mirror? If you do it with the practitioner, of course, practitioner will share and provide feedback of when and how you reveal deepest moments, or, you know, you maybe had excessive thoughts or couldn't relax enough, when you opened alpha or not, the bridge, and when you went deeper. So we comment on that. But then if you're training yourself, you can always activate training mode, where you'll receive audio signals. It can be gone, it can be any music track that you choose, that you can upload it yourself. You can visually just watch the patterns, but it's quite tricky because when you activate your vision too much, it's very hard to keep alpha bridge open, so it can be counterproductive. But still, we do have an option where you can see how, you know, what brain waves, just watch the brain waves that you produce on the screen. And then, of course, there are other options that you can buy as extras to standard packages of the mind mirror. Self-training or practitioner mode. On top of that, you can go and get like feedback, which would allow you, for example, to watch a movie and simultaneously let your brain be trained in desired training program of your choice. And that will be similar to any other classical audio or visual feedback that you would receive with in the clinical field, right? Where the screen may fade when you go away from desired pattern, and it will become sharper, clearer, or bigger as well. Same with the sound as you get to desired patterns and frequencies. So in neurofeedback training, it's kind of, there are, of course, presets there, preset protocols, but most of the time, even then, you would be very careful in selecting which one to choose, which one to train. And normally you would even manually maybe select the frequencies that you would like to inhibit or reward, so suppress or reward, or squash all of them. So there are many variations of what you can do, plus where you can do it, which locations, not just the spots that we use. And of course, though exercises and visualizations, they can be used still, depending on what is being trained. In neurofeedback, it's less common. It's mainly more in alpha theta training, which is the closest to what we do with the mind mirror. And maybe peak performance as well relates to what we do with the mind mirror. So automatic training mode, of course, is more common, and the feedback used will be audio, visual, or tactile. So, and here, just to make sure we're all on the same page, because I may use few words that literally are synonyms. So we know the word neurofeedback. So it will be the same as EEG biofeedback. So we measure electrical brain activity and provide feedback. And neurotherapy, so it's another word. It may be confusing in the beginning if you don't know, but all of these are kind of key search words if you want to look, say, for information. So let's start with, for example, biofeedback. And it's the process of gaining greater awareness of many physiological functions of one's own body by using electronic or other instruments, and with the goal of being able to manipulate the body's systems at will. So Judith always gives the example of a mirror. So if you can just look at yourself, what's wrong with your hairdo in the mirror, you can fix it. If you can't see yourself, it would be hard for you to know what's going on. So the same principle applies to your internal physiological world. For example, we're not always aware of our heartbeat, but if we start monitoring it, we could reduce our pulse, so calm down and relax. And same with our brain waves. If we have a way to become aware of what's going on and how it all works, then we can master it and go into desired states at will. And that's the key, because different combinations of brainwaves will implicate different states. So we want to go into more optimal states. So neurofeedback will be a type of biofeedback that presents real-time feedback from brain activity in order to reinforce healthy brain activity through operant conditioning. During neurofeedback sessions, your brain learns how to bring abnormally fast or slow brainwaves into the normal range. And again, usually it's a passive mode, similar to our self-training program, where you just sit back, watch, listen, or maybe even play a computer game and receive a visual, audio, tactile feedback when your brain meets the set goals. And very often people ask, is it invasive? Is it, do you send anything back? If you do send anything back, so, I mean, any electrical signal to your brain or any other form of magnetic electric influence, this would not be called neurofeedback. We only read the electric signals and send back the information to the brain, but we are not zapping the brain, so it's pretty safe. When you send something back, it will be called different names, not neurofeedback. Brain driving and all other things, but not this. And do you have to work hard? That's another interesting question. Do I have to really, how do I train my brain? The brain trains itself. And I say it's kind of naturally addictive to be in a more optimal state because it makes you feel better and everybody wants to feel good. So if somehow by, I don't know, by virtue of whatever, your personal life story, genetic predispositions, you turned out to be not in a very optimal state or in a very bad brain habit state, I should say, brain would love to receive some guidance that would help itself to normalize, to kind of use energy in a more efficient way. And we'll talk about it a little bit more later as well. So it's easy. The brain just learns itself. And as it feels good, it wants to go back and back more and more often. And the more you go back, the easier you can sustain the state. A couple of more definitions. EEG, we know, so basically EEG is electroencephalogram. And this is like, I'm sure everybody done at least once in a lifetime, the heart, the cardiogram, the cardiac rhythm test, the kind of to measure the electrical activity of your heart. And these curved lines. So electroencephalogram refers to electrical patterns on the surface of the scalp, which reflect cortical activity and are commonly displayed as waves and referred to as brain waves. But there is another word very similar, QEEG, which stands for quantitative analysis of digitized EEG. So since we progress from analog world and no computers to digitized world and very complex computer systems, so now it allows for statistical analysis of digitized EEG recordings so that we can, for example, make comparisons with databases of norms as well as brain mapping, which it's a map that will help you to identify the location of brain dynamics and dysfunction. And QEEG these days can also be proven by all MRIs, magnetic scans, and other techniques which help you to basically look through the brain and confirm that if there is certain lesion or there is a brain injury, and that's why brain waves are not working well in that particular area. So QEEG will show that as well. So just to kind of clarify these few things. And yes, here on the right, you can see how, for example, normal EEG wave would like, or seizure-free EEG would like, and then what happens during epilepsy, because again, this would be one of the major first things probably neurologists will be addressed when we talk about brain waves. But yeah, applications, there are many applications of this, of course. And mapping, here is the map where you can see the frequencies and where they are. It's all green because this is a normal range, but then there would be red. It means too much of alpha, say in the front. Oh, you might be depressed, and or they may be too low of something that will go to the blue spectrum, and then connectivity as well. So you'll see all these connections, and again, we'll talk about this as well. So here we come. I call it fact one, but it's more like a topic one. It's all about energy, and that's my favorite topic, as you know. And I didn't know that, but many of you probably have seen this post already. So did you know that it all started in search of energy? And I completely share these beliefs. Here we see Nikola Tesla, which says, who says, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So we talk about this. Again, this is my belief system. You don't have to share it with me, but I find that there is a huge degree of truth in it. It all starts with the frequency. It all starts with vibration that you sustain, and your energy field will then help you manifest and bring what you want into this physical world. And as we continue, you will see how even what we measure, this electrical activity of our brains, it reflects how we run the energy, what frequency we sustain, and how it manifests in our behavior, or even in mental disorders. Again, this is another example. So this is Hans Berger, the picture of the man that you can see, who in early 1924 was the first one to come up with the word electroencephalography. So he was German psychiatrist. He found a method of electrical activity to record the brain waves. He was the first one who recorded alpha waves. And as you know, that's why alpha bridge is so important, because it's the dominant normal rhythm in the adult brain, healthy brain. So it's kind of obvious why he discovered this particular rhythm first. So here is the phrase from which basically says that he invented this word. It is possible that I might fulfill the plan I have cherished for over 20 years, and even still to create a kind of brain mirror. The electric phallogram, German speakers will do it better than me, but here comes the exact word that we are using up to these days. And then there were many kind of hypotheses of how the world works, the universe works. And he came up with energy as the solution of mind-brain problem. That's the connection between mind and brain. So we know that different combinations of brain waves or different frequencies in your brain will define different states, different brain function, and different behavior. And it all started with his own personal experience of spontaneous telepathy, in which at the time of a mortal danger, as he contemplated certain death, he transmitted his thoughts, while his sister, who was particularly close to him, acted as the receiver. So she was close to him, of course, in terms of relationships, but not in terms of physical distance or geographically. Geographically, she was far away, but she could clearly sense that he is in trouble. And this experience, during war, eventually led him to very serious work and research of trying to figure out how could this be possible. So again, it all started in search of the nature of psychic energy. Here, I thought it might be interesting for you to see basically the actual replications of, picture of his recordings. So I'll read 2 early high-quality EEG tracings that Berger recorded with a double-coil galvanometer in 1928-1929. The lower curve is recorded from Dr. Ginsberg and depicts the most robust EEG findings of the 1930s, 1940s, and 1960s. Bursts of alpha waves appearing as the subject lies with his eyes closed in a state of mental and physical rest. In the lower tracing, Berger has attempted to correlate the trains of alpha waves with the waves of attention described by experimental psychologists such as Wundt, Lerman, and others. So the key takeaway from here is alpha, yes, in a healthy person, alpha bridge should open big enough when the person closes the eyes, and that was the rhythm. So it's a resting rhythm when your attention, your visual activity goes at rest, because you stopped holding on to physical world, you kind of detach from the physical world, and your vision goes introspectively. That's what we know from the mind mirror work. And that's where your kind of journey into insight starts, the journey of awakening, so that later on you can equally pay attention to the inside world and to the outside world and combine the both. And he also found beta brainwaves, because of course, as you go into leave the state of relaxation, and light reverie of alpha brainwaves, you start thinking, you concentrate or speak, and here you will see faster beta brainwaves. So he actually saw both, kind of managed to pinpoint the key things about them. And then I really liked this abstract. I'll read it as well. So EEG is a kind of joystick for life. The neurotherapy addresses the profound level of how energy is running through your brain, helping the brain to rebalance itself and learn healthy self-regulation habits, which, as we'll see through this presentation, will manifest in outer world as better cognitive abilities, balanced emotions, more adaptive and creative behavior. If mind or conscious effort is present, it can make it even worse. The brain access frequencies are reduced and those in deficit are increased. Amplitude from minute voltages from the brain via amplifier are instruments used to control the computer game. So thus, person's EEG is a joystick to operate the game. And you know, in robotechnics, I think, if this is the right name for the field, how they are trying to use the brain now to operate like artificial limb and other things. So really, when we're looking at EEG, it is a kind of joystick for life. So you start your training by playing a computer game, but then you train the brain to do things right. And then this rightness goes with you into real life where you apply it. So I found it's a great metaphor. Another one, of course, as you know, I'm into sacred geometry and I love transpersonal psychology. So golden mean, middle path, balance, shamanic balance, how all of this is relevant to neurofeedback. Neurofeedback has more in common than you might think with shamanism, Buddhism, and even sacred geometry. So in shamanism, disease is a kind of a disbalance. Buddhism will teach you about middle path. So find too much or too low, you always have to stick to the middle. And this is where the truth is, that's the right path. Sacred geometry will tell you about golden mean. Again, same, somewhere in the middle, somewhere according to golden mean ratio. Neurofeedback would say too much of a frequency and connectivity or too little. Both will represent the signs of disorder. It should be just right for the task at hand. Like any energy system in the brain, like any other energy system, the brain wants to use it or use the energy in the most optimal way. So any stuck energy or lack of flexibility or bad brain habits would represent a disbalance or disease. I think this is kind of a good thing to look at it this way. These are really bad brain habits. It happened this way, but the good news is most of the times, with quite a high percentage of success, it's fixable. It can be improved. Some interesting information about alpha, because it is so important. As I already mentioned, alpha is activity at approximately maximum is around 10 hertz, is typically the dominant frequency in the awake brain and the main factor in the organization of other frequencies. Alpha is thus key in the regulation of time and goal-directed behavior. That is, it underpins the temporal organization of knowledge-based consciousness. Harmonics of alpha allow the optimal between frequency communication with alpha activity. So just to remind you or let you know, we see alpha in the middle of our pattern, right? This green bands in the very middle, and literally, physiologically, if we look where alpha comes from, it will also come from the very middle. So thalamus sits in the limbic brain, and limbic brain sits in the very middle of the brain. So here is kind of a symbolic or schematic picture. And you can see that thalamus is literally this gatekeeper coordinating the timing and distribution of the information that comes in, sensory information that comes in. And yes, we associate alpha with body and all the senses. And thalamus keeps the gateway, what should come in, when should come in, and passes this information to the cortex for interpretation and further action. So it's this, like in older times, it's like a phone operator which will receive phone calls from senses, and then it will connect, pass it through to the directors sitting in our conscious brain in frontal lobes in the beta, and allow for communication to happen and the information to be, decoded and the actions to be taken. And what you can see, so you can see all these neural pathways that go from the very center to the back, to the front, to the sides. So it all can be processed, and this is a loop, so it goes back and forth. And that's why alpha is so critically important in general. It's important for our sensory perception, and the critical part there is the timing of inhibition. So that's why alpha is also associated with our attention, because it helps. Inhibition means suppression, so it helps us to open the doors to this signal, this stimuli that are important, and leave behind those which are not important. So as we are losing alpha, we'll be less discerning, so to say, we'll be less focused, because we may be just overwhelmed of what's going on, and it means there will be internal chaos, right? We wouldn't be able to organize our internal space in a healthy way. And then another interesting thing, that the alpha is the central harmonics for all other bands. So slower frequencies can be determined by dividing the alpha peak. So here is the formula. I wouldn't go too far not to waste time, but yes, if you divide it by 2, you get the 5 is the middle one for theta, 2.5 for delta. You'll find faster frequencies, and then the borders of these ranges can be determined by finding golden mean frequencies relative to alpha. So the separation between alpha and theta is found by dividing alpha by golden mean, giving the upper bounds of theta, while the lower bounds of alpha is found by multiplying theta by golden mean. Applied to other harmonics, the following band ranges are determined. So they might be slightly different from what we used to, but this is okay. This is quite common. Some bordering bands are sometimes assigned to either of the frequency bands. So delta 2-3, 4 to 6 hertz for theta, 8 to 12 hertz for alpha, 16 to 25 hertz for beta, and 32 hertz and high for gamma. So I found it still interesting that sacred geometry came into EEG, and alpha is the core there. And really, alpha is such a great subject that from the information and research available, you can tell that, you can make a whole separate program on alpha, on where it's like more details on how it does its function, and all kinds of implications. So what it's involved into, not only in attention and focus, into peak performance, it will be involved into reward system and into salience network, which kind of judges which is important, which is not. It's involved into memory and many other things. So it's like mind-blowing. And here, thalamic radiations, I think it's a beautiful picture as well, maybe in a rougher way describing the same story. So where fibers go from the center of the brain, so they go front and back and sides and top. And the next topic, the universe inside. Did you know that each EEG electrode spans an area of 5 million neurons? So just imagine it's unimaginable, really, numbers to embrace or comprehend. A single cubic millimeter of cortex, cubic millimeter. So if you know, it's tiny, tiny, tiny speck. The spatial resolution of current fMRI technology contains an astounding array of energy regulating equipment. It's 13,000 pyramidal neurons. So these neurons that produce electric signal that we then pick up. 24,000 glial cells. So this will be also cells kind of servicing neuron function, like all the infrastructure, feeding them, taking care of them, and often even facilitating or participating in kind of enhancing or suppressing the communication between neurons. Then 100 billion synapses. So this will be these connections that passes the signal, electric, chemical, and whatever. So passes the information between neurons or nerve cells. And 100 meters of axons. And it's just this tail, so to say, of pyramidal neurons. And the next slide, I'll talk a bit more about these things and then come back. So as for EEG, although electrical activity from as few as 10,000 pyramidal cells acting synchronously may be detectable at the scalp, each electrode itself spans an area containing 5 million pyramidal neurons or more beneath it. So I found it quite impressive. So here I put the picture of a neuron. Here, these yellow spots signify the firing together. So like, just imagine 5 million, it's like a population of a decent city. It's if we talk about Australia, it will be the population of Sydney. So imagine 5 million people doing like same action at once. It's just such a high, unimaginable level of organization. Just I found a picture, it doesn't belong to like how we do the mind here, but I love that they pointed out these two spots, L1 and L2. So just imagine beneath one electrode, you're measuring the activity of these 5 million pyramidal neurons. Those who come from physiology, anatomy, or medical field, you know all that, but just to make it really clear or remind you, neuron is a specialized nervous system cell designed to transmit information to other nerve cells, muscle or gland cells. Most neurons have a cell body, an axon transmitting fiber or branches, and dendrites receiving fibers or branches. And pyramidal neurons or cells are the most frequent type of neuron in the cortex, suggesting that they are necessary for the processing of external signals and motor control. So when these numerous neurons simultaneously generate dipoles, positive and negative charges like in battery, the local field potential becomes highly organized or synchronous. And this produces sufficiently large voltages that can be detected at the surface of the head. And then through the amplifier, through the device that we use, this signal produces EEG that we see on the screen. Glial cells are non-neuronal cells in the nervous system that do not produce electrical impulses. They maintain homeostasis, form myelin in the peripheral nervous system, and provide support and protection for neurons. And synapse is a structure of the nervous system that permits a neuron or nerve cell to pass an electrical chemical signal to another neuron or to the target effector cell. So I wouldn't go too much into details, but of course you can always learn more. It was just to give clarity on how it all works. So I guess it's pretty impressive. The next one. That amazed me again, and those who watched my energy reading program, they will understand better probably. But nevertheless, the nature of duality and oneness, I want you to have another look at it. I try to, of course, approach it from unusual perspective as I normally do. So faster waves ride on or are carried by slower waves. So let's stop here and think about it a little bit. Let's look at the picture first, right? So here we see Roy G, which is actually one wave, but then with the special mathematical formula or algorithm or Fourier transform, we split this into different frequencies. And I'll talk about it a little bit later to bring clarity in. So, and you can see how this kind of delta, the slowest wave, it kind of repeats the major pattern of this wave. And then theta adds a bit more of information on top of it. And then alpha adds a bit even faster, more information on top of it. And then beta weaves even more information on it. As gamma, you see, gamma is the fastest, of course. If we combine this information with how we look at and what we know, what beta stands for, alpha stands for, theta stands for, isn't it absolutely amazing? Isn't it like universal field is still there, like the major carrier, long distance carrier of information? Like in radio, we have, I think, IAM, which stands for longer distances. Like in Moscow, I would pick German radio stations, for example, or even American radio stations. And then FM would be local radio stations. And then all these are more localized stations. And as we know, I didn't focus on that, but delta will be spread throughout cortical sheets. Theta and alpha will be mainly sitting in the center, like pulsing from the center of the brain to the cortex and back. And then beta is highly localized. Beta sits mainly in the front of the brain, and it is highly localized. And gamma will stand for networks. So it will just help to bind the information together. So isn't it interesting that if you sit in your beta, which may be dominant in ordinary pattern, which means that bottleneck pattern that I showed first, which is no good, you're literally just stuck in the front of your brain, in your small self. And then as you open alpha, you kind of start connecting to the geographically or anatomically, if you like, you connect to the center of your brain, and then you're able to go further and to connect with the delta, with the universal field. I found it just this fact absolutely amazing. So delta, what we know is the universal field, instinct, and what that's the way that psychics, mediums, and healers use in their work, is actually carry away. It's kind of, it's like, is it this universal God source energy coming in? And for the faster frequencies, which means theta, alpha, and beta will ride on it. So delta travels long distances and is widespread. Fast beta, your individual conscious small self, will be delivering information locally and is famous for getting stuck, making you feel small and separate and kind of disorganized and anxious. Here, a little bit more on how it works, because I had a problem understanding it. I'm not that great with mathematics, so I tried to keep it really, really simple. So here again, you see the main wave, raw wave, and then it's split into different frequencies. Or the best way, I think, is to look at it three-dimensionally, where you have the time domain, kind of, you have time axis, you have frequency axis, so how it manifests in time, how it manifests through frequencies, how fast, what's the pitch. If we compare it to music, it might be easier to understand, and then how loud it is. So music comparisons are really good here. So Fourier transform is a mathematical function that can be used to find the base frequencies that a wave is made of. So imagine playing a chord on a piano. When played, the sounds of the notes of the chord mix together and form a sound wave. This works because each of the different note waves interfere with each other by adding together or cancelling out at different points in the wave. A Fourier transform takes this complex wave and is able to find the frequencies that made it, meaning it can find the notes that a chord is made from. So Fourier transforms are important because many signals make more sense than when their frequencies are separated. So I guess this three-dimensional picture kind of helps to get an idea, because it's not just a really line, it's more like a surface of the ocean. And I think this was the metaphor comparison that Neil Hancock used in one of the programs, trying to explain these technical details behind the mind mirror. So if you would like to know more about how it actually converts what we read and pick up with the electrodes to what we see on the screen, I highly recommend this program with Neil Hancock, who was the engineer who helped convert digital analog mind mirror into the digital mind mirror, as far as I know. And then another interesting fact or topic, blood and energy. The blood is a manifestation of energy on the physical realm. It may be a far-going statement, but it has a high degree of truth in it. Neurons firing require energy feed in the form of oxygen and glucose carried by blood. Scientifically, it will be called perfusion. Modern magnetic technologies allow to trace the blood flow to the most activated parts of the brain. Their measurements found to be correlating with those of EEG. So when there is no blood or low blood levels, no oxygen and glucose, poor energy, no firing or activation. So logically, brain injuries will cause such lesions of low or no activity. And here is just a chart. Again, I wouldn't go into detail, which basically shows that statistically, it's a quite solid correlation between the signal, the activity, and the brain blood flow to that brain area. Facts, I put them 6 and 7, because now I would like to look at the age dynamics and brainwaves of old and young, because I think it's also very, very important. So what is good for a child, of course, is no longer good for an adult. And sometimes, say, if you look at what we call attention deficit disorder, you may find that the brainwaves of a 12-year-old will look like the brainwaves of a 4-year-old, but what is okay and expectable from 4-year-old, of course, is no longer good for 12-year-old. So it's this lack of focus and attention, since you will see that the dominant frequency is lower, and it defines how brain functions. During eyes closed baseline rest, the theta rhythm, 4 to 8 hertz, dominates the spectral energies of a child's brain, whereas the alpha rhythm, 8 to 12 hertz, dominates the adult brain. So what's normal for children may indicate a problem for adults. Slow dominant frequency may indicate this attention disorder that I mentioned, or variation of it, attention ADHD, hyperactivity disorder, along with attention problems, brain injury, or dementia. And here you can see, oh, you can't maybe see this. So you can see that, as I mentioned, when we look at these maps of the brain, we can see red where it's too much. So in the adults, we would expect to have alpha. Here are adults, here is alpha, here's the back of the brain. And yes, truly, we do have alpha dominant, the most dominant frequency in the back of the brain. And for children, you will see that the most dominant frequency will be theta, and this is normal. And here I gave you the range to kind of show how it develops and transforms. For infants, so 4 to 6 hertz would be the dominant one. It's still called alpha here as kind of central or dominant rhythm, I guess, or the function that it plays. Toddler, 5 to 8 hertz. Preschool is 7 to 9 hertz. Preteen, 9 to 10, and that basically stays like this for adults. And I just want to pinpoint again that it's quite okay for 4-year-old, and I have a son of 4-year-old, for those who don't know, that, you know, he it's hard for him to concentrate. It's hard for him to hold attention span. And at times it's hard for me to get his attention because he's kind of daydreaming or living in his world. And this is kind of fine for a little person of 4. And I think my husband, he mentioned that in the preschool, a very young educator, she was struggling to kind of connect or relate to children in the right way, because she's just graduated, I think, did her training program, and she doesn't have much experience with children, but she doesn't understand that you can't really speak to them or expect them to behave and to listen to you as the adult would. So it's quite normal for them to be this way. And we even were talking about, it's like everybody should be taught about this basic brainwaves, logic behind, so that you don't have any surprises. It's the brain, it's maturing, and this is normal for to be there at this stage, but it would be abnormal for later. How this changes with age and how it's related to memory. So evidence is presented that EEG oscillations in the alpha and theta band reflect cognitive and memory performance in particular. Upper alpha power increases, but theta power decreases from early childhood to adulthood. And we've just seen that when I named you the numbers. Whereas the opposite holds true for the late part of the lifespan, like coming out of sleep and falling back to sleep. And I found it absolutely amazing, because sleep, REM sleep or beginning of sleep, like let me put it this way. When we go to sleep, we close our eyes and we start relaxing. So we naturally closing eyes and starting to relax. If we are healthy, we'll drift into alpha. And then eventually theta will become bigger than alpha, because we'll drift from alpha to theta, and theta will become dominating, and we'll go into this skirt or channeling pattern that I mentioned in the very beginning, that we associate with channeling or trance state, and it's okay for meditators and mediums, but it wouldn't be so common for normal people. They'll just go to sleep. It will be beginning of sleep, this hypnagogic state, or REM sleep state could show up in the same form, in the same way. And then delta would be deep sleep. So really, it's very interesting how, like infants, they spend lots of time in delta, in deep sleep, and then theta becomes dominant. And then, we just seen the dynamics. But then as you grow old, it goes in the opposite direction. So you kind of go backwards, you become a child again. And then if delta takes over, here you go, the door open and bye. So alpha power is lowered and theta power enhanced in subjects with a variety of different neurological disorders and aging, where slowing alpha peak frequency may be indicating onset of dementia. So you'll have memory problems and basically deciphering information, like whatever stimuli coming in, you'll be totally confused. Time, space, your own senses, anything may be confused and messed up in dementia. Good news, it can be offset, most of the cases, with neurotherapy. And interestingly, in relation to memory processes, theta and hippocampus cortex relationship. Hippocampus is that part of the limbic system which stands for the memory, is encoding new information. And alpha thalamus cortex is responsible for searching or retrieval processes in long-term memory. So I thought it's really a separate topic in digging deeper in what comes from where and what it does. But it's interesting how they have their little functions of what, when, and how they do to make things happen that we take for granted.
Can I ask a question, Oxana, on that last slide?
Yeah.
When you say that the alpha is slowing in aging, and are you saying that the peak frequency of alpha is dropping, say, from 10.5 to 9?
Yes.
Do you mean, could it also be that the amplitude is decreasing in dimension?
Both. Judith, it's both. They say brain efficiency will be, or maturity is measured by alpha peak frequency. So the dominant alpha band, we'll see it as a band, right? With the mind mirror. I'm trying to refer to things at least that we will be able to maybe spot with an eye without any special diagnostics or blah, blah procedures that we don't know. We can just spot it with the, naked eye, with what we see with the mind mirror. So yes, it goes up, and then when its alpha peak frequency is often trained for peak performance as well, to help speed up the brain. So really it's just going up frequencies. It will mean going faster, which if it's too slow, needs to be optimized, right? It needs to be slightly faster to be optimal or peak performance, right? So we'll be pushing alpha peak frequency up. And say if it's too much of fast activity, you'll try to put things down, say, because otherwise you have too much beta, and say with the mind mirror, it can look like ordinary pattern. You may have problems falling asleep because your beta will be chatting all the time. You go to sleep and you kind of, you are still there and there is no relaxation on set, and it's hard to go to sleep. It just doesn't work. You need to slow down. You need to learn to relax. It just doesn't work.
Thank you for that.
Other way around.
I have seen this pattern in somebody I've been working with who is having memory problems. He has low amplitude alpha, very low amplitude. And so kind of, I guess, intuitively, I was trying to help him increase his alpha amplitude as well as raise the peak frequency up. And it did seem to help him. His memory, he reported that his memory got better. Yeah, but I also noticed that he had a ton of gamma, and I wasn't sure, he didn't report it as transcendence gamma. So I had this sense that maybe his brain was producing that gamma to try to wake him up,
Yeah. And you're thinking absolutely in the right direction, because the nature of the brain is that it tries to compensate or heal itself or help itself. Because, if it doesn't know any other ways, it's just like with the same, I may just drift a little bit to the side, but, with the children who often are labeled with attention deficit or hyperactivity, and they're given drugs. First, it can be normal for their age, so it's just parents' problem in managing active kids, and that's that's really, parents need some verbal therapy and better understanding. I know it's hard. I have a very active child, so we do what we can. At least understanding and accepting this fact is a good starting point. And then I just think honestly, the nature works in a way that kids try to keep parents alive. So we slow down as we age, and kids are growing. So they try to wake us up and say, hey, life is all about movement and action. And here you go, play with me. Oh, it's your problem. You have to keep up. You have a child. And then there are different types of it. So very often it's just, there is too much theta, and theta will mean you're kind of getting drowsy, and the child is trying to keep himself awake, and that's why he's hyperactive. So it's not just too much beta there, right? Because it will be theta beta ratio, which signifies this attention disorder. So if you are too slow, you're not, as I said, theta means slower definitely than alpha or beta. So you're not focused enough, you're not attentive enough, right? And that's what I was telling about with, give an example from my son's preschool. So little children, they are not attentive. They are not there yet. They are half asleep, really, at times. They're drifting in their dreams somewhere, dream world. That's their world. That's fine. That's where they are. And sometimes, if there is disbalance there in a way that there is too much and the child just gets too active. And with my son, again, great example here, as soon as he gets tired, he will fight it more. So instead of like an adult would probably, oh, I feel tired, I'll lie down, read the book, do something passive, and then drift to sleep. No way, we'll do anything to stay awake. even while reading books, will be sitting in bed like, no, I'll sit as soon as he starts. No, you have to lie down on the pillow, otherwise I won't read to you in bed. No, I'll sit, because as soon as he lies down and closes his eyes, he'll drift into sleep.
Right.
It's funny, or running around till the very last moment, running, asleep. Just because if
I've
he
seen
stops
them fall
running,
asleep over their cereal.
he'll fall asleep. So it's so funny.
Thank you for that.
And another interesting fact that absolutely amazed me, because I think everybody needs to know that. I don't know how much we can benefit from mind mirror work, but as normal people with our own sets of problems, and we need to know that and pass it to doctors, psychiatrists, really pass it on to as many people as we know. So how normally, psychiatrists or psychologists would diagnose like the person? How does it? They look at your behavior. So behavior is no longer the best indicator for diagnostics and treatment, because what's underlying is more important than how it manifests. You have to understand the core of it, right? As I just said, hyperactivity is not a problem when you understand what's really going on. And so you'll be surprised that when the diagnostics is given these days, it's given based on certain behavioral symptoms. So you will be labeled with the disorder, but it's not the label that should be treated. It should be the problem, the underlying problem, which should be treated. So when you present the problem, it will lead you to medication or certain treatment, which is not always or rarely true. And Paul Swingle will say, treat the problem, not the label. And I completely agree with you. And nowadays, the QEEG, so the deeper analysis, so to say, statistical analysis of EEG, and event-related potential is another way. I'll say a word about it later, because I think you just need to know that it exists and how important it is. Allows to look at the neurophysiological roots of the problems, transforming the whole outlook at the patient and the nature of the disorder. The diagnosis is no longer a lifetime verdict, summary of symptoms that fits the label, but rather a more complex set of underlying energy use dynamics, or simply habits within the brain that neurotherapy can now treat, fix, retrain in the brain without side effects, and save you from lifelong predicament. And since I'm preparing for my internship next year, so I've done a few days already at the clinic, brain clinic that I'm going to work for a few days a week next year. They had a case of a girl who suddenly at the age of 16 showed epilepsy. And of course, she was given drugs, and they said, get ready, you'll be on drugs till the end of your days. So how would normal person respond? How would parents respond to that? I think I would feel pretty terrible if someone would present the news like this to me, right? So luckily, they came across this clinic. They did both QEEG and ERP tests, and they did maybe already over 30 sessions of neurofeedback, and she stopped having seizures. There may be occasional one once a month, and it's not as severe as it used to be. And it only happens when she has a trigger. So there is some stress or, disease, like when you go through any illness, really your immunity is down and your, so to say, electrical system, including the brain, is down too. So you're more prone to having other problems. So the weak link comes out kind of and shows itself, speaks about itself first. So, and that's the only thing. And the future looks much more positive when she had a long break without seizures at all, and then came back. But it's not more often than once a month. So it's livable. You can live as a normal person without being heavily drugged, and potentially you may have side effects. I'm not saying it works like one cure for everybody, but it's a good thing to know that certain things, they are not as bad as certain doctors may think, because they simply don't know that there are alternative treatments these days. And just to say a word here, because I think it's relevant, unfortunately, the scientific world and medical world is very slow in approving all of these things. So right now, only this attention disorder is the only thing that has proven success with neurofeedback. So all the rest they will still claim as experimental.
Crazy.
So
Oxana?
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, and maybe you were going to do this later, is that Paul Swingel's Quick Q is available on the Vollistis, and it only uses 5 electrodes, just as we do. So it's quite simple to use and a good quick diagnostic tool for, if we're starting to work with someone we suspect something is wrong, to do that.
Yeah, I'll be talking about it later. Thank you, Gary. I think everybody would love to know that, because it's great news that we can do something as well. It's not costly. You already have the device. You just need to learn how to do it. That's all. And let's move on from here. And yeah, so right on the spot, Gary, look at this. So the closest to what we do and how we can use our 5 electrodes, or you may not even need 5, you can do it with less. There are few ways of how you can do mini diagnostics, and that's what we call mini clinical Q or clinical Q. And I just picked here locations that would be relevant to the mind mirror, at least. It's location 01, so it would be left back spot, left side of the back of the head. It's a legacy of Pennison-Kulkovsky alpha theta protocol, for which Paul Swingel pointed out the following biomarkers, which can be easily identified with clinical Q. And they stand for, at this location, we mainly look at quietude of central nervous system, alpha response, alpha blocking, and excessively high or slow frequency amplitudes. And there are more biomarkers there, and I leave everywhere on every slide, I left you with the read reference. So if you would like to dig more and learn more and find more information, please just, I highly recommend this book, or there are quite a few materials available for free. Then he even says, email my office and I'll send you everything. So that you can find. So I just pinpointed few things that probably you will see with the naked eye, even without the clinical cue. So alpha response, we all know that when a healthy person closes eyes, you should expect alpha increase 50%. So it should be 50% more than before with eyes open. So if it's less, what you can ask about is some traumatic stress and poor retention of information. So I'll jump to the bottom, because I think since we are talking about alpha, I'll stick to alpha here. Alpha peak frequency, we already talked about it. So he calls it main brain efficiency biomarker. And he says if it's above 9.2 hertz, it's good. If it's below, ask about mental sluggishness. So it's harder to focus, alpha, this inhibition, there are failures there. The cage is getting loose and there are problems there. So another indicator on biomarker, it's theta beta ratio that I already mentioned for attention disorder. But he also calls it self-restoration, because it's not only about attention and focus, it's in general about how you kind of, theta will be related, if we think about it, it's this hypnagogic state or REM sleep state. So you may think theta relating to memory and sleep and rest, proper rest, because without this, you wouldn't go into a good sleep. And honestly, the research also shows if you don't have enough of REM sleep, you don't process your kind of emotional and other impressions of the day. So kind of the information received through the day needs to be sorted, and you receive all that and needs to go back and forth, you know, from the frontal cortex into your hippocampus, and like it just sorts, it does this sorting, right? And this sorting of information, unloading, so you wake up fresh, happens in theta. So if it can't happen properly, of course, with sleep, you'll be less attentive because it will be cluttered and you'll be fuzzy and like, oh, what's going on? And everybody knows that if you have poor sleep for whatever reason, you know, you have, like me, you know, I had poor sleep with a young child for like a couple of years. Oh yeah, my attention was quite poor. It was very hard to concentrate and put myself back into shape. And it's obvious, you know, if it's this way, it's obvious. If it's this way for little children, that's fine. If you deprive yourself because of working schedule or whatever, you have to keep in mind, this is critical. This is really important. And then beta stands for kind of fast activity. So thinking, concentration, planning, goal setting, organizing your behavior. You wouldn't be able to do that as well if this ratio, you know, you didn't have enough rest. You wouldn't have clarity that you need and speed that you need. So that's why I guess he calls it self-restoration. Theta, it can be eyes open or eyes closed, and I'm sorry, I'll correct this because it's actually the range is valid for both. And the range honestly stands a bit higher than I think we think with the mind mirror. So they want it to be 1.8 to 2.2. If it's too small, so if there is too much beta and too little theta, if it's less than 1.5. So you may ask about sleep disturbance, poor stress tolerance, racing thoughts, of course, because if your system didn't get enough proper rest, then it's not sorted, it's carrying extra workload that it just didn't manage to sort. Poor stress tolerance, racing thoughts, anxiety, inefficient self-quietening, sleep problems, predisposition to depression. Yeah, of course, because you are in such unstable, already vulnerable mode. And as you tend to be more depressed, you may have low immunity and be more prone to colds and flus. And then it may manifest in fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, exhaustion. And then if it's really, really low, less than 1.5 or 1.8, so ask about predisposition to self-medicating behaviors like alcohol, anxiety, stress-precipitated depression. So, and I mean, depression in general, it's very popular word these days, but really by behavioral set of kind of behavioral symptoms, you can hardly identify what's truly wrong with the person, because again, there is a good example in Paul Swinkel's book, where he says, just the boy or someone, the woman, she may not be depressed as such. It's just she's very anxious and she carries so much stress. So that means she can't cope with her everyday activities. And that makes her feel depressed and frustrated, which would be, you know, quite logical to see in this case. So it's like, what do you really have to treat? You know, do you have to treat anxiety and stress, or do you have to treat depression? And like, not surprisingly, like some antidepressants wouldn't work because they're not addressing what needs to be addressed. They could make it worse. So character disorder trauma, get rewired. Once again, that was a big revelation for me, because certain things I thought are good, and then I'm finding, oh, it's actually can be a sign of disorder. If you think you're pushing too hard, any pushing is not necessary. So let me explain myself. There is nothing wrong in being a perfectionist, one might say. No, actually not. Nature is not that perfect. Just right is the correct answer. As we saw just then, perfectionism can be a sign of OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder with its own signature, beta frequency stuck in the middle of the brain, in the front of the brain. Under or over is equally bad. So see below examples of event-related potentials of analysis with analysis of ADD and OCD, so attention disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder. So I'll say a few words about event-related potentials first. So let me say it's when we look at the brain waves, we look at the general picture or at this surface of the ocean, right? And activity that's happening there in the ocean. It's the best with different waves going on there at the same time. And very often it's compared to trying to understand what's wrong with your car by listening the revving of its motor, through the bumper when you put the engine on. So it's very similar to this. So it's kind of by what we can measure, we are trying to make assumptions where it's wrong. But event-related potentials, it's much more precise. So by multiple repetition, we measure the brain response or brain activity following a stimulus presented in a task. So you may be shown, very often you just may be shown a picture and you say, if you see an animal, you click the button. If you see an animal and flower, you don't click the button. So you only need to click when there will be two animals. If you see any other categories or just, non-matching category, only when two cards are of the same animal category you click. For all the rest, you don't. And then you kind of go through multiple repetitions, and then they are able to draw these waves, right? So let's see what happens with the attention deficit. So obviously for someone who is not attentive, right, his response will be much, much lower. And this is this red line below. And the gray line will indicate the norm, right? So that will be the response. So you can see in healthy controls here, and these are the frequencies, this is the time. So after the stimuli is presented, we see this burst of activity. Hey, here, attention, look, 11, 10, so it will be around, middle of the brain signals. Hey, I got the stimuli, and then beta activity, click the button. Okay, we can see that. Alpha, so the stimuli, beta, click the button. That's normal healthy control. And look how less it's being seen in people with attention disorder. So you can see it's much less red. So kind of even diffused, and the wave tells us exactly the same information. And on the brain map, we'll see it as blue. So it's less than normal. So there is less here and less here. So I'll probably say this kind of what alpha, say or whatever, we received the stimuli, we processed it, and less in beta. So both are lower than supposed to be. What happens in OCD? So here we see the opposite. Look, the normal people would simply ignore, right? When you're presented with irrelevant stimuli or something, you will ignore. And it's fine. You can withdraw your attention and hold your activity because it's not relevant. But with obsessive compulsive, you can't help it. And very often it's based on, how to say, they're looking for conflict, everywhere it's something, oh, this is not right, and this has to be finished, this has been this way, and it's fixation on something, right? So how will we see this? It's completely the opposite picture. In healthy controls, it's okay. It's kind of you are managing to recognize the stimuli, but you do not respond actively to it, and then you hold your action. Same, and it's completely the different story here. You kind of, so you're stuck in the front of your brain. I hope I managed to explain it right, but it's the signature that you can see in the brain. And again, too much or too low, no good. Stuck, no good. again, I'll speak in my best way, you know, metaphorically. They want to impose their reality on the world. Do you understand? They want things to be this way and no other way. Do you understand? And reality is the way it is. It just says, no, that's the way it is. And then they, no, I want it my way. No, I want it my way. And they can't help it. They want it their way, and they're absolutely fixated on that. And perfection, it has a lot to do with that as well. It should be just right, not the way you want it. And I mean, for me, it was like, oh, I never thought of it in this way, that actually, I mean, I'm not saying it's 100% OCD. I'm not saying this, really, please don't take me that far, but I'm just saying there is a degree of truth in it, that like, be mindful. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be just right, just enough, you know, for the task at hand. And because you are torturing yourself, it's a violence over yourself. And whenever we commit violence, it leads us to disorder, you know, disbalance. It throws us out of balance. No sacrifices are necessary. It should be just right. And
Excellent.
then I absolutely loved this one, because as I said, what you think is a character trait could be a sign of a disorder or beginning of a disorder. But then family heritage, you know how you would say, oh, it's my whole family. My mom was anxious and depressed, and my whole family is like this, or my father has bad temper or angry. Oh, this girl is not very bright and very talkative. So you may continue this list, but actually all of this is just the way the person is wired. And I'll read an example from Paul Swingel's book. So Paul is there on the screen, and the book is there on the screen too. And I think it's a good kind of perspective, and the right perspective. So that's why I'm saying spread the word. So what he would say, if we are talking now about frontal locations, frontal positions, F3 and F4, if the theta alpha ratio is below 1 at these positions, probe for frontal alpha attention disorder symptoms, including problems with planning, organizing, sequencing, task completion, attention, and staying on task. Talkativeness is also often associated with this pattern. This is the form of attention disorder that we find is mostly frequently undiagnosed in young females. I assume that this is the case because a chatty, disorganized, flighty girl used to fit our stereotype of female behavior. I see many women in their 30s and 40s whose careers are a disaster and have had many unsuccessful relationships, who show this high frontal alpha form of ADD or attention disorder. They were not offered help as young students, for I assume teachers and perhaps parents thought that these children were pleasant, sociable, and chatty, but how you would say it, Alice, not intelligent. And unfortunately, they were treated in a manner consistent with this stereotype. The child, and then young woman, developed the belief that she had to struggle to keep up, and that inevitably she was not very bright. Her core emotional belief about herself became negative and disappointing, and her life choices reflected that self-belief. These clients are usually depressed, angry, and disheartened, and have to clear the emotional baggage as well as receive neurotherapy to correct the ADD. If the alpha theta ratio is much below 1, one should also probe for pain disorders, etc., etc. So I'll continue with other examples later, but I think this is a beautiful example that, you know, what you think is just a character trait or even maybe inherited family trait, it can still be fixed, because I love this energy perspective. Let's look at the energetic signature. Let's look at the energy dynamics. Let's stop looking at the labels and stereotypes, but what's the energy dynamics behind? Because nobody will be offended if you say, that's how simply the energy flows through you. This is your individual energy dynamics. And this is this way, it just happened this way for whatever reason, and it can be fixed. So I think it's much healthier because the whole society will be healthier from that, with less medication, less side effects, and in general, healthier attitudes and probably more self-actualized people in the end, because this girl, if someone happened to come across the right clinic early in the days, her whole story, life will change from that point on, because the neurotherapy, neurofeedback will change the underlying vibrational frequency and all these bad brain habits. And then we come to a very painful subject, but it's again very common these days, the trauma. And as you know, it's like, can imagine someone who experienced severe torture and trauma that completely disrupted the healthy function of your nervous system. Of course, you'll be out of balance, and your nervous system, like your gas and brake in the nervous system, will be screwed up, along with the electrical activity of your brain. And how deep-seated, the consequences of trauma can be. So just talking about it and trying to becoming aware and kind of justify or analyze, it still may not take you too far, because you may, survivors of torture, of course, you may even have physical traumas, right, and brain traumas, but it's such a huge, unbearable mental trauma which affected your electrical system, thrown it far away from the order. So a delay of failure of alpha to augment following eye closure is typically associated with a loss of inhibitory control, elevated arousal, difficulties relaxing, hypervigilance, and potentially flashbacks and intrusive images. Occasionally, this pattern is also accompanied by an increase in alpha frequency, which suggests relaxing may not have been safe for this individual. Some clients would be unaware of traumatic experiences. Spontaneous recall of trauma occurs after alpha is restored. So what happens when we open alpha? As I said, it's attention goes inwards, and alpha is associated with relaxation. But what is if this young man went through the war and he simply can't relax anymore because he has to stay alert all the time, because that's such, it's engraved in his brain, I have to stay alert to survive, and you can't relax anymore. This is one half of the story. The other story could be, as soon as you start relaxing, as soon as you start looking inside, you will have to face all the skeletons jumping out of the wardrobes, all these tortures and scary scenes that you've seen and experienced. And who would like to see that again? It's painful to see. You want to stay away from that. And usually it stays unprocessed, because it's hard to process to anyone, really, because it goes beyond our capacity to face all this negativity. That's why very often, alpha theta training, which is a clinical version of neurofeedback closest to personal transformation and healing of awakened mind training, in particular, are used to treat trauma. So it will always start with helping the system to relax and find safe balance back with establishing strong alpha. So often it starts with autogenic or temperature training first, and then successive body relaxation. And it's done so that the person, while looking outside, himself or herself can be relaxed and can basically find that safe place where you can't be safe inside yourself, because even that can be difficult. And only then, when alpha is stable and strong, theta can come out. And when theta comes out, it means already that amygdala, and it's our alert or alarm center, fear center in the brain, in the same limbic system, which will kind of raise the flag and start the fire alarm when something dangerous is going on. Is it fake danger, real danger? It doesn't matter. If it was perceived as real, the alarm will go on. So when amygdala is calmed down enough, it allows for safe memories reprocessing from the third person perspective and proper encoding of memories as past, making you more open to the present. Because again, very often the trauma memories, you may have some story and you may think you have the beginning and the end, but in your memory, the way that it's encoded, it's more encoded in your emotional memory rather than throughout the brain and logical memory, where it was, as I mentioned before, properly sorted and put on the right shelf. And you know that this shelf keeps the stuff from the past, and it doesn't relate to the present. It doesn't activate the response to trauma in everyday life just by minor triggers, or you just carry it with you all the time. You keep staying alert all the time. So it is like a great thing of neurofeedback, that it eventually can help those severely like traumatized people to get back to the state where you can start coping with life. You start getting back to yourself and back to the present moment, and being more able to, you know, get out of because carrying trauma is like living in continuous conflict with yourself, continuously trying to resolve the conflict, and all your energy, attention, resources, they go to the resolution of this conflict, and they have very little resources left to cope with life, to establish healthy relationships and enjoy life. So it becomes impossible because you're so absorbed in that conflict. So an interesting experiment of exposing to strong emotionally negative pictures just for 10 seconds resulted in average alpha blunting response of minus 62%. And while no photo was plus 32, and positive photo plus 108.9%. So let me explain this. There was an experiment where participants were shown pictures, and one picture was a farmer and a horse, and it was positive, and apparently alpha measured before and after, alpha after increased 100 and almost 9%. But when they were showing scenes of someone, I don't want to even go into details, someone dragged with a hook, you know, through the skull, dead body in the concentration camp, so that threw your alpha minus 62. And if like control group, I guess, was shown no photo, and alpha was still up, plus 33, I guess they were just happy to participate in the experiment. But I want you to think about it. What happens to us when we feed ourselves with all the negative news that we are just shoved in our face most of the time, instead of like real news or balanced news? So really be mindful of what information you put into your brain, because it will eventually be traumatizing. And especially with all this COVID news, it's ridiculous to where we are dragged or being taken. Be mindful. And that's why, again, I absolutely love all this research data. I want to spread the word and take it out to people. Be more mindful, because it does affect you significantly. In the same way, just being exposed to negative pictures on news, your alpha will be shutting down. That means you'll be getting in a more and more vulnerable state, more prone even to all, not just stress and anxiety or depression. Your immunity system will quickly go down. So you'll get depleted like that. And this is the article. You can find it online, or you can ask me. So I received the training from Australian Neurofeedback Institute, and Mirjana Ashkovic is the director of this institute. She was the deliverer, one of the key people who organized this training. So she works with the survivors of trauma and torture, and it's my deep respect to all the people who work in her organization, because they do miracles. And this brave woman, she had little to no success with refugees who come to Australia and are kind of directed or referred to them by the government. So they work in the government service supporting the survivors. She said 10 years of therapy, no change. And then she learned about neurofeedback and had to invest her own money to get the equipment and get the training, and then on top persuade the management of the organization to let her try it. She said, just allow me to try it on people, because I can see that it's very hard to help them. They're so screwed up. And even then, they had miraculous results. Her article is, just reading the article, I guess everybody will get a sense of trauma, not just a sense, but really some of its signature in your brain, because it's so difficult. But it's a good way to understand how deep it is and how you can deal with it. Plus, of course, the famous book of Bessel van der Kolk, Body Keeps the Score. If you have enough guts to listen, if you haven't done it, listen or read to this book. It's tough, but it will give you a very clear and deep idea of what you can deal with and how to, possible ways to fix it. And a new approach to pharmacology. So again, an interesting thing here. Up to these days, doctors still use symptoms as a trial and error guidance to the choice for the right medication. With modern EEG, a successful outcome can be predicted for certain mental illnesses. For example, same attention disorder, depression, anxiety, and others. EEG phenotypes are intermediate steps between genetics and behaviors, which means they involve both expression of both genetic and environmental factors. These biomarkers that can guide personalized medication and help predict the potential effect of antidepressant or stimulant or neurofeedback, and other cases like even professional suitability tests. For example, there could be no pilots with the presence of seizure-like or similar to seizure-like abnormal EEG activity. I don't know whether this will make much sense to you, but for example, QEEG pattern of frontal theta responds better to stimulants such as methylphenidate or Ritalin, which is often prescribed to attention disorder, whereas the frontal alpha type responds to antidepressants. So even the categories of drugs, you know, the names that they hold, you think, oh, antidepressants are against depression. Not quite. Sometimes you need something different, because if you look at the, again, at the signature, at the EEG, electrical activity of your brain, you'll understand, no, this would work, this wouldn't. And instead of taking, you know, drugs with side effects or making things worse, or, I mean, often neurofeedback starts when, say, kids are already taking Ritalin, and then with the training, the adjustments are made. And in the end, the final goal is to let go of medication completely, because I mean, in real life, before neurofeedback, it would be you'll be taking drugs forever till the end of your days. But then neurofeedback makes it possible to let go of drugs at some stage and feel yourself a healthy person, back to normal. And normal, just quick note, it's a range as well, as we know. It's a range. It's not a static point somewhere. So there is a normal range. And a good thing to maybe pinpoint here as well is that mainly what I was talking about, it's clinical, and clinical will imply that you will deal in, say, in peak performance, that's one story. If these are sportsmen or cosmonauts, that's another story. But in real world, the biggest demand will be in mental health. So where you see people beyond the normal range, beyond the normal spectrum. So you'll see borderline and beyond, and it's different audience. So that's why I think it will be good for us to have a look at the basic kind of alerts or markers. If you see something suspicious in the clients that you see. First, with the mind mirror, you see clients, not patients. And if you see something suspicious, the right decision would be to send them to the right specialist, because if it goes beyond your responsibility, if you are not a psychiatrist or a doctor or someone entitled to deal with mental illnesses, send them to the right specialist to work with. You still can help even along the way, but be realistic and honest. This is good ethics, of professional ethics. And then, since we are talking about drugs here, I thought it would be interesting to say that from EEG perspective, alcohol and marijuana are self-medication. So alcohol and marijuana or substance abuse addictions often come as a comorbid condition for trauma, anxiety, or depression. The people who get addicted might be genetically predisposed by these conditions or severely traumatized, both of which will show up as alpha blockage. So when they close their eyes, they can't open alpha. The mentioned substances immediately open alpha, providing the relief from often unbearable misery and helps to cope with life. What looks like destructive, like many symptoms really that we encounter on a deeper level, turns out to be an adaptive mechanism, since simply they do not know any other alternative. And interestingly, the low voltage fast pattern was shown to have genetic correlates in a recently published study of the EEG and alcoholism, and by others who have identified the genetic link to gene force regulation of a gamma aminobutyric acid receptors and this serotonergic gene. I wouldn't go into details, but the key there is that yes, alcoholism you can be genetically predisposed, and not just alcoholism in general. To alcohol is just a type of kind of self-medication where the person is trying to make his life easier and adapt. As we just noticed, the genetic factor plays an important role, and then the electronic signature in the brain in the form of EEG will play an important role too. And I'll read a couple of more things again from the same book, how Paul Swingle describes what happens with what are the effects of alcohol. And if you like, I'll read about nicotine as well, because I find it interesting. Alcohol, slowing of background EEG and rapid increase in alpha amplitude may affect, usually increase, deep phase sleep, hence corrupting sleep assessment EEG. One of the neurological endotypes found in alcoholics is low alpha amplitude, which is highly heritable and which is rapidly increased with alcohol consumption. The rapid increase in alpha amplitude is associated with the addictive property of alcohol for the genetic alcoholic. And then I think here, what I may mention, two more things maybe. I didn't mention them on the slide, but still. Smokers probably would love to hear that, or those who know smokers, some other people around them who are smoking. Nicotine, temporary increase in alpha peak frequency. So, and if you remember, it's brain efficiency. So that's why we need to smoke to concentrate better and focus better. We don't need to smoke, of course, but nicotine would be a kind of same self-medication for some people who are struggling and may have probably slower alpha, and they need to kick them back in shape. And same with caffeine as well, because it will help you to increase, maybe even just if it's half a hertz or 1 hertz. And normally, from what I read, they say you wouldn't see more than that, fluctuations within the range, but still, even that slight difference can make a huge change. So most of people these days, they'll need a good cup of coffee in the morning to wake up and keep their brains running. And then another interesting research was where they found that females in the follicle phase of the menstrual cycle, they'll also increase alpha peak frequency by 0.3 hertz, which I found amazing. Isn't like making them more efficient just before ovulation. That sounds interesting how hormones affect us as well. So, and fact 11, we are getting to the end. Learning is not a straight line. I guess it's absolutely true for the neurofeedback when you go through this kind of passive mode training, when you let your brain do the work, when you play a computer game or watch the video or use self-training program on the mind mirror. But I still believe it's probably relevant if we do the meditation training to unadvised protocol. It will still be true to some extent. So learning curve in neurofeedback is not a straight line. Neurotherapy, like any learning, takes time, which depends on severity of the problem. It can be 10 sessions to learn relaxation and much more for anxiety and panic. And say with severe trauma, it can be 80 sessions or even 100 sessions. So like any other skill, once learned, it becomes internalized and stays with you. So if you once learned to ride a bicycle, even if you haven't had a bicycle for 20 years, you'll jump on and keep going because your brain remembers. The pathways are there, you just need to refresh them. So fifth order curve, I guess they put it this way because that's how it goes in fifth steps or fifth move, five moves. This corresponds to subjective states. So fifth order curve, initial increase, followed by a dip, second increase, and then exponential increase, end of training. This corresponds to subjective states. Anxious in the beginning, and this is normal. We can always see during the first session, you'll probably notice that your clients may show more beta or more even delta, like, you know, a little bit vigilant because it's a new space, new person, and this is fine. So then you get better as they get better, you get better as habituate to the situation. So that means initial increase. And then what happens? You may try hard to relax. And trying hard in the brain training is usually counterproductive. So it indicates the diff. Because really the key there is let go. And that's the word that you will come across again and again and again throughout unadvised meditations. And then as you give up trying hard, as you finally let go and surrender, you'll go through the second increase. So let the brain just stop being the obstacle, and because your brain wants to learn and nature wants to find its balance back, and it's so much more powerful than what we think we can do once again. So we have to kind of comply with the higher order and surrender. And then passive volitional state. So you kind of, you just set the intention and then let go of it. Let the nature and universe do the rest. That's when you see exponential growth. So I thought it's worth mentioning because very often we naively assume it should be steady, stable progress. No, it comes in ups and downs. And I guess these steps, they clarify what you may expect with somebody who is trying hard and it's not happening, trying hard and it's not happening. And really it's to some extent metaphorical to life, our life as well. If you remember in the very beginning, I said EEG is a joystick for life. Yes, to some extent it is, because if you're trying hard, you're trying to disturb the natural balance. Just let the natural balance take place rather than pushing in, again, skewing it to the other end. And here, the very last thing I wanted to share, key to successful therapy. And that's why I used the word neurotherapy in the topic of our today's program. Even though it doesn't matter which field you come from, it's worth knowing. So the keys to successful therapy lie not in any specific therapy technique, but in the personality and relationship with the therapist. So specific techniques attributes only to 15% of success. And actually it's the same as expectancy or placebo effect. While common factors where relationship with the therapist belong attributes to 30%, double of that. So it's much more important, not which technique you use, but it's much more important what person you are, how much inner work you've done, which eventually shapes up your relationship with other people and with your clients. Humanistic School of Psychology, with one of the key people there is Carl Rogers, is famous for client-centered approach, which points out three main determinants of therapy success. So empathy or comprehension, warmth, positive non-evaluative caring and respect, and congruence, non-defensive, real. So that client feels understood, accepted, and prized in a way that is meaningful to the client. Humanistic psychology is also the one that focuses on client strengths and promotes self-esteem, authenticity, and self-actualization in life. So, and I guess the good therapist would be an example of that, right? So we need to understand, be able to resonate despite of how painful it can be. Someone needs to be present for all these people who need help. So you have to be present to yourself, to your own aches and pains, physical or mental, to be able to allow for the doors to open and things to heal. Of course, warmth is important and non-judgment. So you are caring, you're respectful, and you're not judging because it's the way it is, and it needs to come out and find its way back to balance. And of course, you expect it to be non-defensive and real. You are there, you are present as real other human, other person. And just let me remind you that Anna Weiss, she comes from Humanistic School of Psychology. And that's why I thought also that I should mention all these things. And to the last, to inspire you even more, I think that's kind of critical, even to experienced and non-experienced especially. That's what Carl Rogers said in one of his quotes. In my early professional years, I was asking the question, how can I treat or cure or change this person? Now I would phrase the question in this way. How can I provide a relationship which this person may use for his own personal growth? So I guess I don't have to speak more on that. And you know that it's all about relationships. And even kind of this even balanced relationship open, they will allow for this miracle and wisdom of healing to take place, for the information to flow. And of course, from the brainwaves perspective, we have to remember your own state will be, if your own state it's more optimal and more balanced, others will tend to be more likely to resonate with you because it feels good around you. It feels good to be tuned into you rather than being tuned into their normal self. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't come and ask for help. So it takes more responsibility on you. And recommended books. So out of abundance of literature available, there are lots of articles, and I will leave you with the presentation so you could explore more if you like. Go to Sci-Hub. If you can't find free articles, you'll find them most likely there 99% of the time. So the key book that is closest to the listus, Mind Mirror, and which has clinical cue guidance. And one day I will kind of probably be ready to, my dream is to do theoretical course and practical course on this science behind neurofeedback. It won't be certification course, of course, but it will help to fill in all the gaps for the mind mirror that I felt I had and I was trying to fill. So one day I'll probably do this, and if you are interested, let me know and I'll let you know when I'm ready, so that when I know how to do clinical cue on the mind mirror and do this quick test, or maybe Gary could do that and teach us if he knows it already. I didn't have time just to get there yet. So Paul Swingle, adding neurotherapy to your practice, you'll read more markers that you probably will be able to see even with the naked eye, certain critical things, because at least for location O2 you'll find, plus it's good for general understanding. And he gives lots of good hints of how to maybe do the first interview, or what questions to ask in the beginning and how to handle during the session. So it's a very good book to check, closest to what we do. And then Alpha Theta Neurofeedback in the 21st Century. Gary mentioned this book more than once over the history of our webinars. So great book, which gives you an understanding of kind of where, I can't say that Anavaisis protocol came out of Peniston-Kulkovsky protocol for Alpha Theta, but you'll really have a deeper understanding of how we relate and connect to the clinical neurofeedback world, what are similarities, what are differences, and of course the scientific background and more research. Okay, and it will be more like clinical audience, as I mentioned, not healthy people.
Oxana,
yeah.
In that book, the Alpha Theta book, they do mention CADE as being, and you've probably seen that, as being central to the Alpha Theta protocol. And also it seems that Peniston and actually CADE discovered this before Peniston, and Anna continued on it with the Alpha Theta protocol, but using it for a different project.
Yeah,
which was, you know, creating optimal performance rather than healing trauma.
Yeah.
So it's an excellent book, and I know I've recommended that a number of times, though it's expensive.
No, that's fine. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it, because as I said, and thank you for kind of saying the words that really were worth saying, that you know, we deal with more like self-exploration and optimal performance, because this introspective outlook is so important these days, because when your attention goes completely into external world and gets very over-materialized, so to say, you start losing yourself, right? You start losing your core, who you are, what you truly want. And this is very important part to those who, you know, are into spirituality or self-actualization. If you are a conscious person, of course, you want to stay true to yourself, find yourself, know what's right, and self-actualize. So that's the core difference. But from what I was reading, I realized that it was just in general a boom of alpha research, and there were so many people inspired and doing research in parallel to each other. So I wouldn't make any claims who took from what, from whom. I guess quite a few people at the same time were moving in the right direction, kind of getting closer and closer to the truth of how it works, and kind of taking it into their fields of interest, how it can be applied, where it can be used. So we use it for optimal performance, creativity, self-exploration, spirituality. And then if you are interested in technical foundations, it's like how technically neurofeedback works, where it comes from, where it's located, what function it does, like what mathematical formula is there. All of this technically very well explained in Thomas Kalura book, Technical Foundations of Neurofeedback. So there are more textbooks, of course, but they will give you overload or take you away from maybe mind mirror work. So the first two I definitely recommend, and then if you're a technical person, you're very welcome to read this one, because it well explains what I particularly liked in this last one, the explanation of peak performance and where it comes from, the very core of it. And then that's the final slide for today. Isn't the modern neurofeedback like literal expression of idiomatic expression, tightening the nut and bolts in the brain? I'm not sure you have the same expression in English, but we definitely do have one in Russian. So your nuts and bolts in the brain that go loose, and then there is a way to fix them with neurofeedback. Or if we are talking about energetic core of everything, energetic perspective, isn't it more like removing the curse? This is it for me for today. I know that I initially planned many more slides and many more facts, and then I decided I'll stick to the key ones and wouldn't overload you, because certain topics are so huge and so complex and technical that you can drown in this field today. So if you like this program, I think it may be continued, because as I said, I think both alpha and theta, we can talk hours just about alpha and its importance and what it does. And how it participates like in the natural reward system. There are lots of other little interesting things that, I mean, I'm still trying to comprehend and digest with the overload information that I had. So here we are, it's over 2 hours, and I'm sorry if I couldn't answer all your questions. It's a huge field, but I hope at least I managed to inspire you to learn more and deliver the basics. Any feedback, welcome. Otherwise, we'll be happy to see you next year with Judith, and happy Christmas and New Year celebrations.
My kitty is trying to walk across the computer here, so I'm fighting with her. There is one other book that you might be interested in, or other people might be interested in. I may have recommended it in the past. It's this one, if you can see it.
Memory Reconciliation in Psychotherapy. Yep, who's the author? Matthew it's edited, and Geoff Hall, the neuropsychotherapist. What's that?
Yes, neuropsychotherapist special issue. So it's not specifically on EEG, but it relates to it and to our work as well, and particularly if you're going to be doing any clinical work. I'm more involved with research myself, and one thing I'd like to see done, which I've never done, is using the clinical cue before our protocol and do a post-clinical cue. And like to see that, you know, if a number of people would do that across sessions, just to see what happens, you know, in terms of Swingle's clinical cue, and in terms of what we do in our treatment with our protocol that we normally use. So that would be one thing that would fascinate me, and I may try to do that. I just haven't had enough clients that were amenable to doing something like that. So, you know, I don't know if you're planning on doing that, but I hope so.
Yeah, I really, really would love to do that. And I know Judith has been dreaming about this for years too. So it can be more validated and recognized in the scientific world. So I hope if I can do this, but
so maybe if you can come up with a research protocol, Judith and I and a number of others can jump on board with that, and maybe do some work to support what you're doing.
Yep. Yeah, it would work both ways, and I think it's a great idea. It's a great idea because I can see, you know, like few more gaps that needs to be filled.
The next step for us will be to do a webinar demonstration of that Swingle protocol, that mini QEEG with Velistus.
That would be great.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that for a long time. I think it would be interesting to not only do it for pathology, you know, or a measure of improvements with the awakened mind, but also to check Swingle, because a lot of times Swingle, from what I know of him, says that hyperextended alpha can be a sign of a brain injury, but it can also be a sign of a healer. So maybe we want to, for people who are manifesting and live in altered states, just cross-reference with Swingle and make sure that his research actually fits highly advanced people. Future directions, there we go.
Yes,
and Oxana,
totally.
I would just invite you, if you wanted to do a part 2 of this, all of those unused slides, I expect that we'd be very interested in seeing those. And thank you for doing this, very interesting. One of the main things I got out of it was that we're definitely going the right direction with the mind mirror, because some of those pathologies we're automatically training out for both self-trainers. If that alpha peak is too low, well, then you can just set for alpha synchrony and raise it up to 10.5. And if the amplitude's too low, then you can just go into you don't even have to own the features pack. You can just use the amplitude controls and frequency adjustment and under mind mirror options and add more alpha. So yeah, we've got most everything we need, unless we've got some profoundly compromised brains that we're working with. And, there is something to be said about following that Analyze protocol all the way past the transformation and into higher states training, and higher states training maybe helping people rewire their pathologies. So, but certainly I think it's important to, for studies, that we could do studies with that mini QEEG. And it's certainly important for us to know these things that you've mentioned here and brought to our attention. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it was lovely. And in another direction that I'm sure you're interested in are supplements and herbal treatments for, because we all know that some of us know that the L-theanine and acetylcholine will increase alpha for people who are low in alpha. So, adjusting diets and supplements can be very helpful to people along with their training.
Yeah, I would just say thank you, Oxana. That's a wonderful integrative work, pulling information from such diverse arenas of work. And it's a lot of work, and I appreciate it very much. Very, very helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. Anybody else?
May I just say, because you and Gary reminded me of a few more things, that really there could be lots done in, just for me, it was interesting to trace the origin of what happened before, Max-K, during Max-K, how all of this evolved. And there are articles that, like, you can have a special program on, like, how it all unfolded. And, Joe Camilla and Elmer Green and all of it, like, and speak more, of course, about, say, parallel work, Pennis and Kulkowski, because they were at least tested scientifically and they did the research, so argued and modified, blah, blah, along the way, but still, it will enhance understanding and how we relate to others and clear difference with that. And another thing I was interested, as you mentioned, using have a clear understanding how we can use the presets that we have, because as you mentioned, alpha symmetry, it's like peak performance, and it would be good to have like this comparison of these are the standard protocols in neurofeedback, and that's what we have already inbuilt. You don't have to go to fights, they're already, for most of healthy people, this is a good way. This is just a solid package you can work with. And then if you go further into like exploring these extraordinary states and others, I should say that, Judith, you probably will find that, how genius and madness comes together. So I would say extraordinary abilities will come with pathologies. You may discover that, oh, this is just dissociation and there. And then I said, research on sleep and memory and
well, Oxana, you have a job now. So write all that down for 2022 topics.
I love your madness.
I'm mad enough. I hope they'll, how to say, Gary, you will understand me. I have certain concerns. I have some concerns about going back into the box, how much I'll be able to squeeze myself into very tight box where I have to be certain way, certain size. I'll see. So if I meet the right people, I guess they'll even appreciate that I'm kind of hardly squeezable in the box.
Yes, you'll meet the ones you need to.
We appreciate the unlimited size of your box, Oxana. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Judy.
All right, so we'll
Okay.
see you next time. And thank you very much for this. And thank all of you for being here with us. And we just want to wish you happy Christmas,
New Year's, whatever.
Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, Wanzika.
That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful.
And thank you to Oxana and Judith. This was fascinating and awesome. I really appreciate it.
Excellent, Rose. Great to see you. So happy holidays to all of you and happy New Year. Normally we light up with EEGs and wear little hats and antlers and stuff, but Oxana's been working on this presentation for quite some time. So we thought it would be a nice jump start to a new year. And as you can see, it has indeed spawned some new topics for us. So we look forward to seeing you on the webinars and the beginning of the year. And in the meanwhile, wish you very, very happy everyday life and love with your family and friends.
Yes, merry everything.
Merry everything.
Thank you.
All right,
And-
we'll see you next time.
And happy Barbados
Yeah.
Bahamas. Happy
or
Bahamas.
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 Bon voyage, everybody, until we meet again.